Acoustic Kitty. In the 1960s, the CIA launched a secret project with one goal: turn a cat into a spy. It sounds like a joke, but it wasn't. The program was called Acoustic Kitty, and the idea was simple, in theory. Cats were small, agile, and ignored by most people, perfect for surveillance. So the CIA planned to implant a microphone inside a cat's ear, a radio transmitter near the base of its skull, and a tiny wire running along its spine. That way, the cat could secretly record conversations and transmit them back to agents nearby. Surgery alone cost millions. They chose a gray and white female cat as the first test subject. Once implanted, the next challenge was training it, and that was a problem. The cat didn't care about commands, targets, or missions. It got distracted. It wandered off. It wanted food. The CIA tried everything: behavior modification, rewards, punishments, just to get the cat to walk in a straight line toward a human target. Eventually, they scheduled a live test. The plan was to drop the cat near a park bench where two suspected foreign agents were sitting. From there, it would casually stroll over and pick up their conversation. They released the cat from a CIA van across the street. It ran straight into traffic and was hit by a taxi. The mission ended before it even began. The project dragged on for a little longer before it was quietly canceled. Officially, the program was shut down because cats couldn't be trained to follow instructions in the field. Years later, a declassified memo confirmed the project had been real, and that millions had been spent surgically wiring up house cats in an attempt to spy on people. Operation Snow White. In the 1970s, the Church of Scientology launched the largest known infiltration of the US government in history. Their goal was to erase anything unflattering about Scientology from official records and find out who was trying to expose them. They called the operation Snow White, after the goal of cleaning government files about Scientology. And it wasn't small. It involved around 5,000 undercover agents placed in embassies, IRS offices, and government agencies in more than 30 countries. Their job was simple: steal documents. Agents broke into government buildings, snuck into restricted archives, and planted listening devices in offices. They even wiretapped phones and used fake IDs to pose as officials. Their biggest target was the IRS, which had denied the church tax-exempt status. The operation was controlled from inside the church's leadership, and it was working. For years, nobody noticed what was going on, until someone messed up. In 1977, two agents were caught breaking into a federal building. That single mistake exposed everything. The FBI launched an investigation, raided Scientology offices, and uncovered thousands of stolen documents. The scope was massive. Not just spying, but full-on infiltration. The evidence pointed straight to the top. L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, had created the whole Snow White program. But when things started closing in, he vanished. His wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, was arrested along with 10 other top officials. She was sentenced to prison for her role in the operation. L. Ron Hubbard was named as part of the conspiracy, but he never faced trial. He disappeared and didn't show up in public again for years, and even then, only briefly. Business plot. In 1933, the US was in chaos. The Great Depression had crushed the economy. Unemployment was at record highs, and Franklin D. Roosevelt had just been elected president with big plans, including new laws to regulate Wall Street and tax the ultra-rich. Not everybody liked that. Behind closed doors, a group of businessmen and bankers began to panic. They saw Roosevelt as a threat to their power, maybe even a traitor to the wealthy class he came from. So they came up with a plan: remove him. The idea? Stage a military-style coup, install a puppet leader, and take control of the government. They knew exactly who they wanted to lead it: Major General Smedley Butler, a highly respected Marine known and trusted by troops across the country. They assumed he'd be on board, but they were very wrong. When Butler heard the pitch, he pretended to go along, while secretly gathering information. He listened as they talked about building a private army of 500,000 veterans, backed by wealthy donors who would, under his command, force Roosevelt out. Then, once he had enough, he went public. In 1934, Butler testified before Congress and exposed the plot. The public's reaction? Shock. Headlines exploded across the country, but instead of launching arrests, the government downplayed the threat. No one was prosecuted. Most of the names behind the plan were never even revealed. The media attention faded, and the story almost disappeared. But years later, historians revisited the evidence. The congressional report confirmed that Butler had told the truth, and that a real attempt to overthrow the U.S. government had taken place. If he had gone along with it, history might have taken a very different turn. The Gulf of Tonkin incident. In 1964, the U.S. claimed it had been attacked by North Vietnamese forces in the Gulf of Tonkin. According to the official story, on August 2nd, the U.S. Maddox was attacked by North Vietnamese patrol boats while patrolling international waters. 2 days later, on August 4th, both the Maddox and a second ship, the USS Turner Joy, reported a second attack, this time in the middle of the night, during rough weather. The incident was called unprovoked and aggressive. It didn't take long for President Lyndon B. Johnson to respond. He went on national TV, demanded action, and asked Congress for the authority to strike back. Just 2 days later, Congress passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, giving Johnson nearly unlimited power to escalate the war in Vietnam. Troops were sent, airstrikes began, and within months, the U.S. was fully at war. But here's the problem. That second attack, the one that justified it all, it probably never happened. Declassified documents and internal reports later showed that what actually occurred on August 4th was a case of radar error and miscommunication. The U.S. ships were firing into the dark, reacting to false radar readings in rough weather, not enemy boats. Even at the time, some in the military had doubts. The reports were vague. The details didn't add up, but the government pushed it anyway. Johnson later admitted in private, "For all I know, those damn Navy boys were shooting at flying fish." Still, the story worked. The public believed it. Congress gave the green light, and the Vietnam War escalated. Over the next decade, more than 58,000 American soldiers never made it home, and millions of Vietnamese civilians were lost to the war. Operation Mockingbird. In the early years of the Cold War, the CIA realized something. Headlines could be more powerful than weapons, and that's how Operation Mockingbird began. A secret effort to influence news media around the world. The goal was clear: control the narrative. If the public saw things the way the CIA wanted, it would be easier to shape foreign policy and harder for enemies to gain support. So the agency started recruiting journalists. Some were paid, others were persuaded. A few didn't even know they were being used. By the 1950s, the CIA had built a network of reporters, editors, and media executives across the US and overseas. Some were told to plant fake news stories. Others were given classified information to publish at just the right moment. And some were told to keep quiet when it counted most. Major newspapers, wire services, and even TV networks were involved. Declassified reports later confirmed that at least 400 journalists were connected to the operation in some way. And it didn't stop at writing articles. The CIA also funded magazines, cultural groups, and student organizations, all designed to promote certain ideas and silence others. They fed the public only what they wanted them to hear. For years, the program stayed in the shadows. Then, in the 1970s, everything started to crack open. A series of investigations, including the famous Church Committee, revealed the scale of the CIA's influence. Operation Mockingbird was exposed, and it became clear that the agency had been manipulating media on a massive scale, both abroad and at home. The CIA later claimed that the program had been shut down, but questions never really stopped. Were all the connections really cut? How many journalists knew what they were doing? And how much of the news was actually being shaped behind the scenes? MK Ultra. MK Ultra started with a question: could the human mind be hacked? In the early 1950s, the CIA launched a secret program to find out. They were convinced that if they didn't crack the science of brainwashing, the Soviets would. So the CIA began experimenting on people. Some volunteered, most didn't. They tested drugs, hypnosis, electroshock therapy, isolation, cutting people off from all sights and sounds. anything that might weaken a person's will or make them easier to manipulate. But their favorite tool was LSD. They believed LSD could be used to control people during interrogations, wipe memories, or even create programmed assassins. So they started giving it to people without telling them. One operation took place inside bars and adult venues in San Francisco. CIA agents would lure people in, dose their drinks with LSD, and observe them through two-way mirrors. They called it Operation Midnight Climax. Other times, the tests were carried out in hospitals or prisons, often targeting the poor, the mentally ill, or anyone unlikely to fight back. In one case, a man named Frank Olson, a government scientist, was secretly dosed with LSD during a retreat. Days later, he fell from a hotel window. Officials claimed he jumped on his own, but years later, that story was questioned, and the CIA admitted they had drugged him without his consent. MKUltra involved over 150 experiments across the US and Canada. The CIA even paid for experiments through fake organizations, so universities had no idea they were involved. In 1973, as investigations started closing in, the CIA director ordered all MKUltra documents destroyed. But some files survived, and when they were declassified in the 1990s, the truth came out. The CIA had run secret mind control experiments on hundreds, maybe thousands of people. Some suffered permanent psychological damage. Others never even knew they were a part of it. CIA and UFO. During the 1950s and 60s, UFO sightings surged across the United States. People saw lights, saucers, flashes, reports flooded in. But behind the scenes, the CIA wasn't just investigating, they were adding to the confusion. It all started with something called Project Blue Book, a military investigation into UFO sightings. Officially, it was about research. Unofficially, it's a different story. The CIA realized many of these sightings were actually caused by top-secret aircraft, like the U-2 spy plane, flying higher than anything civilians or pilots had ever seen. Instead of setting the record straight, officials often let alien rumors spread to avoid revealing secret aircraft. Because for them, a UFO was better than a spy plane. They didn't want enemies figuring out what tech the US had or where it was flying. So when people saw something strange and reported it as a UFO, the government didn't correct them. In some cases, they even fed the rumors. A 1997 report from the CIA openly admitted that over half of all UFO reports in the 50s and 60s were linked to classified aircraft tests. But at the time, no one was allowed to know. Some witnesses were dismissed as crazy. Others were told they didn't see what they thought they saw. In more extreme cases, former intelligence officers claimed the government even planted fake stories and monitored UFO groups to make sure no one got too close to the truth. By flooding the conversation with rumors and noise, the CIA made sure no one was asking the real questions. What was the US flying? Where was it flying? And who was being watched? It's still debated how much was intentional disinformation and how much was just convenient silence. The Watergate Scandal. It all started with a break-in. June 17, 1972. 5 men were caught inside the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex in Washington, D.C. At first, it looked like a failed robbery, but the men weren't ordinary burglars. They had ties to the White House. And the more reporters dug, the stranger it got. Secret recordings, bribes to keep people quiet, fake documents, and a growing trail that pointed straight to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign. The press kept pushing, especially 2 journalists from the Washington Post, Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. With the help of an inside source, later revealed to be FBI Deputy Director Mark Felt, known only as Deep Throat, they uncovered a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of government. Nixon and his team had tried to cover it all up. They paid off witnesses, pressured investigators, and even used the CIA to block the FBI from looking too closely. But it didn't work forever. The key evidence? A secret recording system inside the Oval Office. Nixon had recorded hundreds of hours of conversations, including ones that revealed the cover-up. When the tapes were discovered, the White House tried to block their release. The fight went all the way to the Supreme Court. On August 5th, 1974, one tape was released, and it showed the president had been involved in the cover-up just days after the break-in. The political fallout was instant. Facing impeachment, Nixon resigned. He was the first, and so far only, U.S. president to ever do so. Dozens of officials were convicted, including some of Nixon's closest aides, but the scandal also left something else, a new word. From then on, almost every major scandal came with a gate at the end. The Manhattan Project. In 1939, Albert Einstein signed a letter to the U.S. president. It warned that Nazi Germany might be trying to build an atomic bomb. The administration took that seriously. By 1942, a secret program was underway. It was called the Manhattan Project, and almost no one knew it existed. Not Congress, not the public, not even the vice president. Across the country, hidden facilities were built in remote towns. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, Hanford. Scientists, engineers, and military officers were quietly recruited. Their families were told almost nothing. Some workers thought they were building power plants. Others didn't even know what their jobs were for. In reality, they were racing to split the atom and build the most powerful weapon the world had ever seen. At the center was physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer. Brilliant, intense, and obsessed with the project's success. Under his leadership, the bomb was designed, built, and tested in total secrecy. On July 16, 1945, the first nuclear test lit up the desert in New Mexico. The explosion was so powerful it melted the sand into glass and sent a shockwave miles away. Soldiers watching from bunkers described it as terrifying and beautiful at the same time. 3 weeks later, the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Thousands of lives were gone in an instant. Only after that did most Americans even learn the Manhattan Project had existed. It had cost nearly $2 billion, the equivalent of over $30 billion today. It had operated in complete secrecy for years, and it had forever changed the world. After the war, the project didn't end. It became the foundation of the U.S. nuclear program and started an arms race that would define the Cold War. Want to hear the craziest real-life escapes from North Korea? Watch the video on your screen now. Thanks for watching.